are going to be talking about something that is very close to my heart. And this is the topic of salvation. So, I don't really know how to start this topic, but a lot of this will be about my life story, and I'm hoping that it will influence you guys, or at least you will be able to relate to it. So, I kind of grew up with this works-based mentality, where I believe that everything has to be earned, in order to be considered a good person. It is your works that people see, that make you a good person. And so, when it came to my spiritual life, I wanted to be the same way. I wanted to earn God's love. I wanted to be so good as a Christian to the people around me that God had no choice but to say that, this is my child, this is a good person, and whatnot and whatnot. But then came my actual salvation, and this is when everything started to make more sense. So to start off, can somebody please open Ephesians 2 verse 8 to 10?
Faith. And this is not from yourselves, it is the gift from God. It is not from works, so that no one can boast. For we are his workmanship, having been created in Christ Jesus for good works that God prepared beforehand, so we may do them.
Thank you so much. So, from this, there are two key points that I want to talk about, which are salvation and grace. So firstly, what is salvation? Salvation is defined as being the saving of human beings from sin and its consequences, which are death and separation from God, by Christ's death and resurrection. So when you find the time, I hope that you will read through the book of Leviticus, because what happened was, as we all know, Israel was God's chosen people. They did what they did, and because they had strayed so far from God, they were given a very strict set of rules that they had to follow in order for them to come back into God's favor. So when you kind of think about it, if we looked in their time, every time that you sin, you had to sacrifice an animal. And when you look at how many times you sin in a day, or how many times you sin in a week, don't you think that it would be a bit expensive for you to be able to sacrifice a bull or a ram or a pigeon every other day? So what happened is that after all of that, Christ had to come, and with Christ came grace. So grace is undeserved favor. Grace is undeserved favor. So verse 8 and 9 state that we have been saved by grace through faith, so that no one can say that they made it by their own works. This means that nothing that you could have ever done could have made up for your sins. No amount of sacrifices you could have ever made would be able to make up for the sins that you committed. And when I think about this, it kind of brings me back to the story of the jailer and Paul and Silas. So it's the only time in the Bible where someone was asked, how do you get saved? And this happened there was a conversation between the jailer and Paul. So Paul says, the only way for you to be saved is if you believe in Christ Jesus. Now, when you kind of take it back, in the story, what happened was, Paul and Silas were going around, and, they were doing their work, and they performed a miracle. They delivered somebody from demons. Now, the thing is, the demon that this person had benefited other people, because it would tell the future, so people making a fortune off of fortune telling and whatnot. And they got angry that this demon got removed because now they couldn't make their money. And so they went and they put Paul and Silas in prison. So when Paul and Silas were in prison, they got beat up and everything. And around midnight, they start praising God. These people are just singing praises and everything. And the ground starts to shake. And all the jail cells just open wide. So when this happened, the person who was in charge of them, the jailer, was upstairs, heard this. And he ran downstairs to check what was going on. So when he got downstairs, he saw that these cells would be open, and he was worried that if these people escaped, he was going to get into trouble. So the first thing he wanted to do was kill himself. He was on the verge of killing himself. And so Paul sees this and tells him that we're not going to go anywhere, just calm down, nothing's going to change, we're going to stay here. And because the jailer saw all of these miracles and all of these things transpire, he fell on his face and he felt a need, he felt a conviction to be saved, which is why he asked, how do I get saved? Now, this story kind of resonates with me. I relate to it a lot because I feel like a lot of people find God in the darkest of times. So, for me, some of you might know my story, some of you might not know my story. I grew up in the church, so I was born in the church, I was saved and everything. It's just that when I was younger, I took my salvation for granted. So I knew that God would forgive me, and I knew that my salvation cannot be taken away. So I would listen to God and do His will sometimes, but I didn't really mind sinning all that much until a time came a couple of years back, actually. So I got really, really sick, and I had to be put on some medication for about 6 months. I had to take this medication every day. So one of the side effects of this medication was that it would make me extremely depressed. So I don't know why I thought I could handle it. Month 1, month 2, month 3, and 4, I was good, you know, a little depressed, a little sad, everything was okay. Then towards the end of month 4, I got suicidal. Like I was a danger to myself. I literally could not be alone with myself. I constantly wanted to hurt myself. I always thought about killing myself. There was a night that came where like I was so scared to go to sleep. I was so scared to be left alone in my room because I don't want to tell my parents what was going on because parents make it a big deal and whatever. And I didn't know how they were going to handle it. So my parents leave, I'm crying. And eventually I'm just like, okay, I know that like I had a great support system, but my support system didn't understand what I was going through. They really couldn't be there all the time. So I prayed about it and I was like, Lord, what I need is for you to keep me alive and to get me through this. I just need to sleep and I need you to keep me alive. And this is the prayer that I prayed for 2 months while I was still on this medication, while I still had to fight all of these bills. And that is the only way that I'm alive today. So for me, this was a very big moment because when I went to God, the first time I had to cry about my issue, the first time I had to go to God about this whole situation, I didn't feel like God was going to listen to me. I looked at the way that I was living my life, and nothing about it really reflected God. Like, sure, I go to church, sure, I do all of these things, but at the heart of it, I knew that me and God were not in a great place. I didn't think God was going to save me, but because I was in a situation where I have no control of what's going on, I don't know what I'm going to do to myself, I don't want to make it someone else's problem. The fact that in that moment, when I was a sinner, when all of these things were going on, God still decided to listen to my prayer and still save me. That was what led to a transformation. Because Him saving me physically is what led to my saving spiritually. They said one thing, go to the bottom. Anyway, this is what led to my saving spiritually. Because after that moment, I genuinely felt God's love. It was the first time in my life I felt like I didn't have to work for it per se. And I might be broken as a person, going through whatever. But the fact that God would take His time to come and get me out of my situation showed me that my God is an unfailing God. He loves me so much. And His grace will find me anywhere. This is where I truly started understanding being saved. I truly started understanding being saved. And I committed my life to God because at that point I was like, I can't deny your existence anymore. I can't deny what you did. And when God shows up in your situation, it will never be the same. You will have no choice but to turn your life around. And that is what happened for me. So, this leads us to point number 2. So point number 1, if you were taking notes, was salvation. Point number 2 is how grace is a gift. So, like we have said before, somewhere in the verse, it said, you cannot earn it. And you really cannot earn God's grace. And if you try to take credit for it, I had to learn this the hard way, but if you try to take credit for being a good person or for your salvation and all of those things, God is going to humble you and He will show you that you could never amount to it. There's this message I heard in a podcast that was like, the closer you draw to God, the more of your sinful nature God reveals to you. Your true sinful nature, God will reveal to you. And this is not done to scare you or to make you feel bad about yourself, but it's to show you just how expensive your grace was, number 1, how you could never pay it, number 2, and how endless His love is. So, like I said before, I had like this work-based mentality. And because your Christian journey won't always be like a straightforward one, you and God are always good. Last year, I kind of drifted a bit from God, and other things get in the way. And when that happened, I tried to still maintain my outward like Christian appearance to everyone else. Because Christians are supposed to be this type of way. So I tried to meet God God's standards, the things that God had made me do, the fruits of the Spirit, I tried to match them on my own because I was like, I'm distant from you. I'm not really trying to grow closer to you, but I just need to be in a good place with you because I know that that's enough as a Christian. To me, that was enough. So I try to do all of these works. I try to be patient with people. I try to be there for people. I try to be generous. I try to be all of these things. And I failed so miserably at everything. I felt like I wasn't meeting the mark. And I think a lot of us struggle with that. Like, people think that because you're Christian, you're always going to be perfect. So I'm struggling with all of these things. And at some point, I get depressed. I spiral into depression again. And so, because, again, the only place we go to is the feet of the Father, I started praying, and I was so honest with God. Because with salvation, I understand that it is a relationship. And in any relationship, for it to work, there has to be complete transparency. You have to tell your partner the truth at all times. So I come before God and I'm like, listen, I don't love you. I am trying to love you, but I am failing at everything. And when I finally let it go and I left it at God's feet, He took over. Like, in that moment, I just felt so at peace. I felt God's comfort. I felt God's love. And for a whole month, like I said, I worked for everything. I wanted people to see me as a good person. For a whole month, I did not care about anybody. I did not try to be anything for anybody. I did not care about anything. I just kept my eyes focused on God in that entire time. And it was so crazy that in that time, because I knew the season I was in, God just wanted to show me His work. So when the season ended, I found all these people coming to me like, you're like my safe space. You're like the person I go to. The love that you show me is something I've never experienced, and all of these things. And these weren't things, these were words that came from me. Nothing I did earned me the title of being a good person. And yet people still came to me and said that I was a good person, and said that I was the thing that I had tried so hard to be. God had made me that thing when I just left it in His hands. That was just one of the things that God does, like the transformations that came with surrendering to God. A lot of what salvation is purely just surrendering and leaving things at the feet of Christ. This brings me to, I told you my message will be short. Please just. So my last point is God's love. So can somebody open Romans 8, verse 31 to 39? Anybody?
What can we say about Proverbs? If God is on our side, then everyone here against us. God did not give back His own Son, but He gave Him for us. If God gives us, won't He give us everything else? If God says His chosen ones are acceptable to Him, then everyone bring charges against Him. Or can anyone condemn Him? No, indeed. Christ died and was raised to life, and now He is at God's right side. Speaking to me first, can anything separate us from the love of Christ? Then trouble, suffering, and hard time, or honor, and nakedness, or danger, or death. It is exactly as the Scripture says. For you we face death all day long. We are like sheep on the way to be butchered. In everything we have won more than a victory because of Christ who loved us. I am sure that nothing can separate us from God's love. Not life or death, not angels or spirits, not the present or the future, and not powers or powers we know. Nothing in all creation can separate us from God's love for us in Christ Jesus our Lord.
Thank you. So the main gist of that entire passage was that nothing in this world, whether spiritual or physical, can ever separate you from the love of God once we have it. I think that as Christians, when you're not saved, your struggle is that you take God's salvation and God's love for granted. And when you are saved, you struggle to understand why God would love you, because you finally see yourself for who you are before God as a sinful person. And oh my goodness, let's see. And in this whole point, what you need to remember is that God's love for you is so great. That entire passage to me is like a love letter from God, just telling you that regardless of what you face, regardless of what circumstances come your way, God's love will never fail you. And it is so great, it is so unconditional, it is so amazing in its magnitude that if you ever came to see God's love, you cannot see God's love and stay the same. If you ever encounter God's love, if you ever truly encounter God's love, you can never stay the same. You can never run back to the same things. And God will do such a work in you. He will transform you so much that you will have no choice but to show and exude the same love that God showed you to the people around you. You know, we have this mentality that sometimes we're all like, I will come to God when the time is right. Right now, I need to get my life together, and then when I come to God, when I come to Christ, I'm going to love Him, and I'm going to do all of these things. But how can you love God when your love is impure and God is love? How can you come to God and say, I am going to love you, when God is love and you do not know God? One thing I have had to learn in this life is that human love is selfish. The love that comes from us as human beings that we show other people is impure and is extremely selfish. So when you try to come to bring it before God, you realize, because the word also says, your works are like filthy rags before the Lord. The Lord will not accept your works because they are so dirty. And the reason why He says this is because when you try to love God from your own heart, when you try to love God in your own way, you only do it for your own self-righteousness. You will say, Lord, I'm going to do all these good things for you. I am going to do whatever because this makes me a good person, because this is going to please you. But when you look at it at the heart of it, what you're doing is what you think God wants you to do. It's what you think will make God say, oh, this is a good child. Oh, this is the right person. And what that is at the end of the day is self-righteousness. That is not the love of God. And so God will not accept a counterfeit love, which is why if you truly want to form a relationship with Him, you come before Him, and God will always say, He will give you everything you want. All you simply have to do is come and surrender to Him. He does not ask you to do works. He does not ask you to change anything. He just asks you to ask for forgiveness, and He will cleanse you of all unrighteousness. He will make you clean. You just have to come before Him, and He will make your path straight. He will give you direction. He will give you everything that you need, and you will have the added benefit of going to heaven when everything ends. Because life is so uncertain. You will face so many things. And I don't know how many of you in this room can say if you die today, you're actually going to go to heaven. Or if you go before the feet of God, God will actually say He knows you. So, with this, I would like to kind of end it off with like this verse to conclude. Can somebody open John 1, verse 5? I'll just read it to you because this might take a lot of minutes. And the light shines on the darkness, but the darkness has not mastered it. So my version says, the light shone on the darkness, and the darkness could not overcome it. The darkness could not overpower it. You can see this with your own eyes. When there is light in the room, all the darkness flees. So I see it in my life as well. When God showed up in my depression could not overcome God. When I was sinning, when Jesus died on the cross and showed up in my sin could not overcome Him. So I struggle to understand why some of you are facing the issues that you face. When God says that anything that He puts His hand in, anything that you involve in, He will overcome. Whether it be your addiction, whether it be your depression, your loneliness, whatever you are facing, God says if you bring it before Him, He will overcome every situation that is laid at His feet. So I struggle so much with how people always make excuses for why they can't come to God. For you're always waiting for the supposed right time. And I know that to some degree the church plays a part in this, because sometimes you come here with your, not necessarily this church, could be any church. You come with your problems, you come with stuff that you're facing. And all the holier than thou people will judge you for things. And so you feel like you need to be perfect when you come to God. But that is not why the church exists, and that is not why God is present. God is present for the broken. God is present for the sick. God is present for those who are suffering. You're supposed to come to his house seeking shelter in your Father, and your Father will help you overcome each and every situation that you are facing. All you simply have to do is come to him and lay it all at his feet. He will do the transforming. He will do the loving you. He will give you all that you need. Because I'll be so honest, if you try to seek anything in this world, it will never amount to what God could ever give you. I have had to learn so many lessons about God's love and his faithfulness and just what mercy is, what grace is, and everything that I've faced. And with what I have learned and the encounters that I've had with God, I have reached a point where you could offer me anything on this planet. I will not take it if it will take me away from the love of God. Because that is all that I need, because that is all that will sustain me in the end. And I have the security of knowing I'm going to heaven. I do not know about you.
Amen.
So, I want you guys know, just to complete, I'm not trying to force you to be saved. I am not trying to force anything on you. I just want you guys to, at the very least, like when I was praying this message, my only desire was for you to at least be so curious about God that you seek him out to see what I am speaking about. That was all I wanted. And I really hope that in the end, you guys really do see God. So in this time, I would like you to think, for the rest of this evening and whenever you can, I want you to really think about your life. And I want you to just see, in your life, can you really say that you have been saved? Can you say with certainty that you have been saved? Can you say with certainty that you have experienced the grace of God? Can you say with certainty that if anything happens, you will be secure in God? That you can face any issue that comes to you? Can you?